My name is Claire Whitmore. I am 37 years old. And on the morning my family planned to celebrate Christmas without me, I learned they had already sold my grandmother's house. The strange part was this. The buyers believed I had agreed. The even stranger part was that I was the only legal owner. I found out by accident, one email, one attachment, one forged signature. That was all it took to destroy everything I believed about the people who raised me. At first, I honestly thought someone had made a clerical mistake. Families don't secretly sell each other's homes. Not normal families. Not mine. At least that was what I kept telling myself, while staring at the purchase agreement on my laptop. Then I noticed the property address. 1248 Hawthorne Lane. My grandmother Eleanor's house. The place where every Christmas morning smelled like cinnamon, fresh coffee, and pine needles. The place where she taught me how to bake cookies without measuring cups because she always said good food came from instinct, not recipes. The place where she hugged me after my father died. The place she once whispered would always feel like home no matter what happened. Someone was selling it, without me. My pulse became so loud I could barely hear the Christmas music playing softly in my apartment. Outside my window, the city looked beautiful. Fresh snow covered the sidewalks. Children pulled bright red sleds through the park. Neighbors carried wrapped presents into their cars. The entire world seemed wrapped in warmth, except mine. I opened the next attachment. Closing documents, inspection reports, a settlement statement. Everything looked official. Everything was complete. Everything except one page, the power of attorney. My signature sat neatly at the bottom. Except it wasn't mine. Someone had copied it, not perfectly. Just well enough that a busy office might never question it. I leaned back in my chair. My first instinct was to call my mother. She always knew what to do. Then I stopped. Because something suddenly felt wrong. Very wrong. 3 weeks earlier, she had insisted I spend Christmas with my college friend Rebecca in Chicago. She said everyone needed a quiet holiday this year. Grandma's house was too emotional after her passing. She promised we would celebrate together in January instead. At the time, it sounded reasonable. Now, it sounded planned. Every conversation from the past month began replaying in my head. Daniel asking whether I still kept important paperwork in my apartment. Melissa casually wondering if my passport was still valid. Mom asking exactly what day I planned to leave town. I had answered every question, without thinking, like an idiot. I grabbed my phone and opened the family group chat. The latest photo had been posted less than an hour earlier. Mom stood in Grandma's kitchen smiling beside Melissa. Daniel was hanging lights outside. The caption read, "Getting everything ready for Christmas. Can't wait." I stared at the picture. Something didn't belong. Behind them, on the dining room table, sat 3 thick blue folders. Grandma always kept property documents in blue folders. Always. She had once laughed at herself for buying the wrong color 20 years ago and refusing to replace them because they had become part of the house. No one else knew that. Or so I thought. I enlarged the photo. One folder had a real estate company's logo. My stomach dropped. This wasn't a holiday dinner. It was a closing. Right inside the house Grandma had loved more than anything. Before I tell you what happened next, if you're enjoying this story so far, please take a second to like this video, subscribe, and turn on notifications. It truly helps this channel reach more people who love emotional family stories like these. And tell me in the comments, what would you have done in her place? I'm curious to read your thoughts. I still wanted to believe there was an explanation. Maybe my mother had misunderstood the paperwork. Maybe the realtor had contacted the wrong Claire Whitmore. Maybe. So I called the number listed on the purchase agreement. The realtor answered on the second ring. Her voice sounded cheerful. Until I introduced myself. Everything changed. There was a long silence. Then she quietly asked Claire Whitmore, "The owner of the property on Hawthorne Lane?" "Yes, that's me." Another pause. Longer this time. Finally, she spoke again. "Mrs. Whitmore, I've actually been trying to reach you for 2 days. Your family told us you were traveling and preferred everything handled electronically." I felt every muscle in my body tighten. I asked one question. "Did you ever speak to me directly?" "No," she answered immediately. "We were told that wasn't necessary because your brother had already delivered your signed power of attorney." I closed my eyes. Then she said the sentence that changed everything. Mrs. Whitmore. If you didn't sign those papers yourself, you need to stop tomorrow's closing immediately, because by this time tomorrow afternoon, your grandmother's house won't belong to your family anymore. I didn't answer right away. Instead, I asked the realtor something that had suddenly become more important than anything else. Who told you I wasn't coming? She shuffled through papers, then answered. Your mother. She said you hated dealing with legal matters and wanted the family to handle everything. That almost made me laugh. I worked as a senior compliance analyst for one of the largest insurance companies in the state. My entire career revolved around contracts, signatures, and legal procedures. My family knew that better than anyone, which meant they hadn't lied because it sounded believable. They lied because they assumed no one would bother checking. I thanked the realtor and ended the call. For nearly a minute, I simply sat there. No tears, no panic. Only one thought kept repeating in my head. They really believed I would never find out. Then another question hit me. Why was my name on the deed in the first place? Mom had always said Grandma left the house to all 3 of her children equally. That story had never changed. Not after the funeral, not during family dinners, not even when Daniel joked about turning the property into vacation rentals. If I owned the house alone, then either my mother had lied for months, or Grandma had never told anyone what she actually did. I opened my laptop again. There had to be something I was missing. Buried in the email was another attachment I hadn't noticed before. A preliminary title report. I downloaded it. The first page listed the property owner. Claire Ann Whitmore. No co-owner, no trust, no shared estate. Just me. I checked the date. Ownership had transferred almost 18 months before Grandma died. I stopped breathing for a second. That couldn't be right. I had visited Grandma nearly every weekend during that time. I drove her to doctor's appointments, bought groceries, fixed leaking faucets, cleaned gutters. We talked about everything. She never once mentioned transferring the house. Why would she keep something so important from me unless she wanted to? A memory surfaced without warning. Late one October afternoon, about a year before Grandma passed away, she had asked me to take a half day off work. She refused to explain why, only saying she had one last errand. I picked her up just after lunch. Instead of going to the pharmacy like I expected, she directed me downtown. We stopped outside an old brick building. Whitaker and Sloan, attorneys at law. I smiled. Making a will again? She laughed softly. You're never too old to annoy your children. I stayed in the waiting room while she disappeared into an office with an elderly attorney. Nearly 2 hours passed. When she finally came out, she looked exhausted, but peaceful. On the drive home, she stared through the passenger window almost the entire time. Then she suddenly reached across the center console and squeezed my hand. Claire, can you promise me something? Of course. Promise me that one day, if people you love ask you to choose between keeping the peace and protecting yourself, you'll choose yourself. I frowned. Where is this coming from? She smiled. Old women think about strange things. I laughed. She changed the subject, and I never asked again. Now those words echoed differently. Protect yourself. Not protect the house. Not protect the money. Protect yourself. My phone buzzed again. Mom, calling. I let it ring. Then again, Daniel. Ignored. Melissa. Ignored. Finally, a text appeared from my mother. Sweetheart, please call me. There's something important we forgot to tell you. Forgot. The word irritated me more than it should have. People forget birthdays. They forget grocery lists. They don't forget that someone owns a $700,000 property. I didn't answer. Instead, I opened our family photo album stored in the cloud. I wasn't looking for pictures. I was looking for dates. Grandma's birthday, Thanksgiving, Easter. I noticed something strange. Every photo from the past year showed Daniel standing unusually close to Grandma's desk. The same antique oak desk she never allowed anyone else to touch. At Christmas, he leaned against it. At Easter, he rested his hand on it. On her birthday, the desk drawers were slightly open. I enlarged the image. There was a blue folder sticking out just enough to recognize it. The same folder sitting on the dining room table in today's picture. I suddenly remembered another moment I had dismissed at the time. 3 months after Grandma's funeral, Daniel had called asking if I still had Grandma's spare house keys. I told him no. Mom kept them. He sounded disappointed. Then he casually asked another question. Do you know where she kept her paperwork? I answered honestly. Probably somewhere in that old desk. He laughed, said he was just curious, then quickly changed the subject. At the time it meant nothing, now it meant everything. A loud knock on my apartment door made me jump. I wasn't expecting anyone. When I opened it, my downstairs neighbor smiled awkwardly. Claire, sorry to bother you. A delivery driver left this by mistake. She handed me a large overnight envelope. There was no return address, only my name, typed, not handwritten. Inside was a single sheet of paper. No greeting, no signature, just one sentence. Don't let them open Grandma's safe before you get there. I read the sentence 3 times. Nothing else, no explanation, no signature, no clue who had sent it. Only 8 words. Don't let them open Grandma's safe before you get there. I turned the envelope over. Nothing. No fingerprints I could see. No company logo. Just a standard overnight mailer. The shipping label had been printed less than 2 hours earlier, which meant someone knew I had discovered the sale, or someone had expected I would. I rushed downstairs. The delivery van was already gone. My neighbor shrugged apologetically. I didn't see his face. He left almost immediately. I thanked her and closed the door. A safe. I hadn't thought about it in years. Grandma kept an old steel safe hidden behind a large oil painting in her bedroom. As children, Daniel and I believed it contained treasure. One rainy afternoon, we had begged her to let us see inside. She laughed and opened it. There was no gold, no jewelry, only documents, insurance papers, birth certificates, old family photographs, a tiny velvet box containing Grandpa's wedding ring. She smiled and said something I never forgot. People think valuables sparkle. The most valuable things are usually made of paper. Years later, after Grandpa passed away, she changed the combination. She never opened it in front of anyone again, not even me, until one evening, about 6 weeks before she died. I had brought her dinner after another round of chemotherapy. She barely touched the soup. Instead, she asked me to help her upstairs. She walked more slowly than usual. When we reached her bedroom, she looked at the painting covering the safe. For a long moment, she simply stood there, almost as if she were deciding something. Finally, she shook her head. Not today. She whispered it more to herself than to me. Then she smiled. Let's have dessert instead. I never asked why. Now I wished I had. My phone vibrated again. This time it wasn't family. It was the realtor. Claire? I'm sorry to bother you again, but something strange just happened. I grabbed a pen. Go ahead. She lowered her voice. Someone from your family called asking whether I had spoken with you. I said no, because at that moment I hadn't. Then your brother asked whether all copies of the title report had already been sent. That question immediately bothered me. Why would he ask that? Did you tell him? No, I simply said everything was proceeding normally. Then he thanked me and hung up. She paused. Claire? He sounded nervous, not angry, scared. That was the first crack. Until then, I had imagined my family confidently carrying out some carefully planned scheme. Fear changed that picture. Fear meant something had gone wrong, something they hadn't expected, and that something was me. I opened my laptop again. Instead of reading legal documents, I searched old emails from Grandma. There weren't many. She preferred handwritten notes. But one message caught my attention. It had been sent almost 2 years earlier. Subject line, can you print something for me? Inside was a single attachment, a scanned insurance policy. Nothing unusual, except for one sentence in the email. Don't delete this after printing. One day you'll understand why I wanted you to have a copy. At the time, I assumed she simply didn't trust computers. Now I downloaded the attachment again. Every page looked ordinary, until the last one. In the bottom corner, someone had handwritten a number, 47-1832, blue ink, Grandma's handwriting. Not part of the insurance form, just 3 numbers. I stared at them. Then my heart skipped. 3 numbers, a safe combination. I quickly opened the family photo from earlier that day. The painting behind Grandma's bed was missing. I zoomed in. The wall looked strangely empty. Someone had already moved it. But had they opened the safe, or were they still trying? I immediately called the realtor. One question: has tomorrow's closing time changed? She checked. No. 10 o'clock sharp. Why? Because if the safe still hadn't been opened, my family had less than 18 hours to find whatever they believed was inside, and whatever they were looking for. They believed it was worth risking everything. I didn't sleep that night, not because I was afraid, because every answer uncovered two more questions. If the house already belonged to me, why risk forging my signature? Why not pressure me into selling it instead? Why invent a power of attorney? And most importantly, what was inside that safe that made everyone so desperate? By midnight, I had filled 3 pages of notes, dates, phone calls, emails, tiny details I had ignored for months. Grandma always believed patterns mattered more than isolated events. She used to do crossword puzzles every evening. Whenever I asked how she solved them so quickly, she'd smile. Don't chase the loud clues. The quiet ones tell the truth. I looked at my notes again. Then I saw it. Every suspicious conversation had started only after one particular day, the day of Grandma's funeral. Until then, no one had mentioned the house, not once. But after the funeral, everything changed. Daniel suddenly wanted to organize family meetings. Melissa insisted we should clean out the attic immediately. Mom repeatedly said paperwork had to be handled quickly before taxes became complicated. At the time, I thought they were simply trying to stay busy while grieving. Now I wondered if something had happened that day, something I hadn't seen. I opened another photo album. Pictures from the funeral reception, friends, neighbors, flowers. Then one image stopped me. Someone had taken a wide photo of Grandma's living room. Most people were talking near the fireplace. But in the background, barely visible through the hallway, Daniel was coming out of Grandma's bedroom, alone. He wasn't carrying flowers. He wasn't helping anyone. He was holding one of the blue folders. I zoomed in until the picture became grainy. His expression wasn't sad. It was focused, almost anxious. Another memory surfaced. That same afternoon, he had asked everyone whether they had seen Grandma's house keys. We spent nearly 20 minutes looking for them. Eventually, Mom announced she had found them in Grandma's coat pocket. At least that's what she told us. But now I wasn't sure she had. Maybe she already knew exactly where they were. Maybe she never lost them at all. My phone buzzed. Unknown number, I answered cautiously. Hello, a man's voice replied. Is this Claire Whitmore? Yes. Who is this? My name is Peter Lawson. I live next door to your grandmother's house. I almost dropped the phone. Mr. Lawson had lived there for decades. Grandma always called him the unofficial mayor of Hawthorne Lane because he somehow noticed everything that happened on the street. He sounded uneasy. Claire, I wasn't sure whether I should call, but I think you need to know something. Go on. I've seen your family at the house almost every evening this week. That wasn't surprising. Then he added something that was. They've been bringing different locksmiths. My stomach tightened. Different locksmiths. 3 of them. None stayed longer than 20 minutes. Yesterday, one of them looked frustrated when he left. He kept saying he couldn't open it without damaging the mechanism. The safe. They were trying to break into the safe, without the combination. I thanked him. Before hanging up, he hesitated. There's one more thing. The first night they came, your brother carried several empty storage boxes inside. When they left, those boxes weren't empty anymore. I froze. What kind of boxes? Document archive boxes. White, with blue lids. The same kind law offices use. That meant they had already removed something from the house, but not everything. Otherwise, they wouldn't still be trying to open the safe. I immediately called the attorney whose name appeared on the title report. His receptionist answered. Mr. Whitaker had already left for the day. I asked her to leave an urgent message. 5 minutes later, my phone rang again. This time, it was him. Claire, I had a feeling you might call. His calm voice immediately steadied me. I explained everything. The forged signature, the realtor, the safe, the locksmiths. He listened without interrupting. When I finished, he remained silent for several seconds. Then he asked a question I hadn't expected. Has anyone mentioned your grandmother's second estate file? Second estate file? No. He sighed. Then we have a problem. My heartbeat quickened. What second file? The first file contained the deed. The will. The basic estate documents. But your grandmother instructed me to prepare another sealed file. It was never meant to be opened unless someone attempted to interfere with the transfer of ownership. I stood up so fast my chair nearly tipped over. Where is it? There was another pause. That's exactly what worries me. It should have been inside her safe. And if your family has been trying this hard to open it, I believe they already know it exists. The words hit me harder than I expected. There was another file, not another copy. Another file, prepared separately, hidden deliberately, and apparently important enough that my grandmother had created specific instructions for it. I pressed the phone tighter against my ear. What's inside it? Mr. Whitaker answered carefully. I don't know. Your grandmother insisted I never read it. I prepared it. I sealed it. She signed across the envelope. That was the end of my involvement. Then how do you know it exists? Because she made me promise something. If anyone ever came asking for that file before you did, I was to tell them I no longer had it. My heart skipped. Did someone ask? His silence answered before he did. Yes. Who? Your mother. About 3 months after your grandmother passed away. She said she wanted to make sure every document had been properly distributed. What did you tell her? Exactly what your grandmother instructed. That I no longer had it. I sat down again. So Mom knew, not what was inside, but that something else existed. Something she couldn't find. Mr. Whitaker continued. She came back a second time, this time with your brother. Daniel did most of the talking. He kept asking whether there were any undisclosed property records. I told him no. That was true. The second file wasn't about ownership. At least I don't think it was. You don't think? Your grandmother smiled when she sealed it. She told me one sentence I'll never forget. Sometimes the truth needs good timing. I wrote those words down. They felt important. Almost like another piece of a puzzle I still couldn't see. Then Mr. Whitaker surprised me. Claire, I'd like you to come to my office tomorrow morning, 8 o'clock, before the closing. I frowned. I thought the closing was at 10. It is, but I have something I'd like to show you first. Can you tell me what? Not over the phone. His tone changed, more serious than before. Bring every document the realtor emailed you, and don't tell anyone where you're going, not even if your family calls. We ended the conversation. For the first time all day, I felt like someone besides me actually understood how serious this had become. I packed a small overnight bag. Not clothes for Chicago, clothes for home. If I left within the hour, I could reach my hometown before dawn. Halfway through packing, another notification appeared. Melissa had tagged me in a family photo. The caption read, "Missing our favorite sister this Christmas. Wish you were here." Dozens of smiling faces. Christmas cookies, wrapping paper, laughter. Anyone looking at that picture would think we were the happiest family in America. I noticed something no one else would. Grandma's favorite rocking chair wasn't in its usual place. It had been moved, directly in front of the hallway leading to her bedroom, blocking the view, almost as if someone didn't want people seeing what was happening farther inside the house. I zoomed in. A tiny sliver of the hallway remained visible, just enough to see the edge of the painting that normally covered the safe, except the painting was hanging crooked. Grandma never left that painting crooked. Never. She straightened it almost every day, even when arthritis made it painful. A chill ran through me. Someone had definitely tried to reach the safe. Whether they had succeeded, I still didn't know. I grabbed my car keys. Snow had started falling harder. The drive normally took just under 4 hours. Tonight it would take longer. I didn't care. Around midnight, I stopped at a gas station just off the interstate. While the tank filled, I bought coffee and checked my phone. 8 missed calls, 5 from Mom, 2 from Daniel, 1 from Melissa. No voicemails, only 1 new text. It wasn't from my family. It was from the realtor. Claire, someone just called pretending to be you. They wanted to confirm that tomorrow's closing was still happening. I asked them to verify their date of birth. They hung up immediately. I stared at the message. They weren't just trying to sell the house anymore. They were trying to find out what I knew, which meant they had already realized something had gone wrong. I looked out through the gas station window. A black SUV sat at the far end of the parking lot. Its headlights were off. The engine was running. Maybe it belonged to another traveler. Maybe not. I climbed back into my car without taking my eyes off it. The SUV didn't move, neither did I. Then, slowly, the driver's door opened. A man stepped out. He wasn't wearing a coat despite the freezing temperature. He looked around the parking lot, then directly at my car, and started walking toward me. The man stopped about 10 feet from my driver's side door. He didn't knock on the window. He didn't wave. He simply stood there with his hands visible, as if he didn't want to frighten me. That alone frightened me. I lowered the window just enough to speak. "Can I help you?" He glanced once toward the black SUV before answering. "Are you Claire Whitmore?" My grip tightened around the steering wheel. "Who's asking?" Instead of answering, he reached slowly into his coat pocket. Every instinct told me to drive away, but he pulled out something completely unexpected. An old Christmas ornament. A tiny hand-painted wooden angel. One wing had been repaired with gold glue years ago. I knew that ornament. I had broken it when I was 9. Grandma had spent an entire afternoon fixing it instead of throwing it away. She always said broken things deserved patience before replacement. There was only one person outside our family who could possibly know that story. Mr. Lawson, the neighbor. The man smiled faintly. "Your grandmother asked me to give this to you if something ever felt wrong. Wrong. Not if she died. Not if the house was sold. Wrong." I unlocked the door. He climbed into the passenger seat, brushing snow from his shoulders. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. Then he handed me a small sealed envelope. "This arrived in my mailbox 2 years ago. Grandma asked me never to open it. She said if everything turned out the way she hoped, I should burn it without reading it. But if her family ever started fighting over the house, I was to find you." I looked at the envelope. My name. Written in Grandma's careful handwriting, not printed, not copied. Written. My throat tightened. "Why didn't you bring it sooner?" he sighed. "Because until yesterday, I honestly believed your family was simply cleaning out the house. Then I saw 3 different locksmiths. Then I watched your brother carry boxes out after midnight. And today?" He hesitated. "Today I overheard something I wasn't supposed to hear." I looked at him. "Daniel was yelling at your mother in the driveway. He said if Claire gets into that safe before we do, we're finished. Finished. Not disappointed. Not broke. Finished." Mr. Lawson continued. "Then your mother answered something that bothered me. She said, 'Forget the safe. Find the second key.'" "A second key? To what?" He shook his head. "I don't know. But after hearing that, I knew Grandma hadn't been imagining things." "Imagining what?" He looked out through the windshield. "About a year before she passed away, she came over for coffee. She wasn't scared. She was disappointed. She told me she thought someone had been entering her house while she was at medical appointments." I frowned. "Did she know who?" "She suspected. But she refused to accuse anyone without proof. Instead, she started making tiny changes. She moved books, folded towels differently, left coins in strange places. When she came home, they had been disturbed. Someone was definitely searching the house. A cold wave ran through me, searching, not stealing. Looking for something, exactly." Mr. Lawson nodded. "She believed they were searching for documents. Not money, not jewelry, paper. Just like she always said, the most valuable things are usually made of paper." I carefully opened the envelope. Inside was a single folded sheet. No letter, no explanation. Just a hand-drawn floor plan of the house. At first it looked ordinary: living room, kitchen, dining room, garage. Then I noticed a tiny red circle, not around the safe, not around Grandma's bedroom, around the old greenhouse behind the garage. The greenhouse hadn't been used in years. After Grandpa died, Grandma rarely even walked out there. Across the bottom of the page, she'd written only 7 words. "The safe protects the truth. The greenhouse hides it." I stared at the sentence. Nothing made sense anymore. The safe wasn't the destination. It was the distraction. Whatever my family desperately wanted, Grandma had never left it inside the safe at all. Mr. Lawson quietly smiled. "I think your grandmother knew exactly how your mother thinks. She wanted them looking in the wrong place." I folded the map carefully, if that was true. Then tomorrow morning wasn't just about stopping the sale. It was about getting to the greenhouse before anyone else realized the safe had never been the real secret. At that exact moment, my phone lit up again. A message from Daniel. Claire, wherever you are, don't come to Grandma's house tomorrow. A second message arrived before I could even process the first. It's too late now. I had a feeling he wasn't talking about the sale anymore. I read Daniel's message 3 more times. It wasn't a threat. It didn't sound confident enough. It sounded desperate. There was a difference. People who believe they're winning tell you not to interfere. People who know they're losing beg you to stay away. I looked at the clock on the dashboard. 12:47 a.m. If I kept driving, I'd reach Hawthorne Lane shortly after 4. Still hours before sunrise. Still hours before anyone expected me. Mr. Lawson seemed to be thinking the same thing. If the greenhouse matters, don't park in the driveway. Your mother notices everything. Park behind the church. There's an old walking path. It leads directly behind your grandmother's backyard. Hardly anyone uses it in winter. I nodded. Grandma and I had walked that trail dozens of times when I was little. I hadn't thought about it in years. Mr. Lawson smiled sadly. That's exactly why she chose it. She knew which memories people forget. He climbed out of the car and closed the door. Before walking back to his SUV, he leaned toward my window. Claire, one more thing. Your grandmother wasn't afraid of dying. She was afraid of leaving you alone with people who only loved you when you were useful. Then he drove away. The rest of the trip passed in silence. No music, no phone calls. Just the sound of snow against the windshield and the growing feeling that every mile was taking me closer to a truth I wasn't ready to hear. At 4:18 a.m., I turned onto Hawthorne Lane. The neighborhood was dark except for scattered Christmas lights glowing softly through the snow. Everything looked peaceful, too peaceful. I parked behind the small brick church exactly where Mr. Lawson suggested. From there, the walking trail disappeared into a line of bare maple trees. The snow reached almost to my ankles. Every step crunched beneath my boots. I instinctively slowed my pace. The quieter I became, the louder the night seemed. After a few minutes, Grandma's backyard came into view through the trees. The old greenhouse stood exactly where I remembered. Its glass roof reflected the moonlight. Nothing moved, at least not at first. Then I noticed fresh footprints, not one set, several, leading directly toward the greenhouse, none leading away. A cold shiver ran through me. Someone was already there. I crouched behind an old oak tree and watched. A flashlight beam suddenly flickered inside the greenhouse, then another. Voices, low, urgent. I couldn't make out every word. Only fragments. Move it. No. Check again. She'll be here. My heartbeat quickened. Daniel. It was definitely Daniel. Then I heard Melissa. There's nothing under here. We're wasting time. A third voice answered. My mother's. Your grandmother hid it somewhere. Keep looking. So they had figured it out. Not because they solved Grandma's clue. Because they had exhausted every other possibility. I slowly moved closer, staying behind the hedges that bordered the garden. The greenhouse door was slightly open. Through the gap I could finally see inside. Flower pots had been overturned, shelves emptied. Old gardening tools scattered across the floor. The place looked as though a storm had passed through it. Daniel knelt beside an old wooden workbench. He was pulling out every drawer. Melissa was lifting loose floor tiles one by one. My mother stood in the center of the room holding a faded notebook. Grandma's gardening journal. She wasn't reading it. She was shaking it, hoping something would fall out. Nothing did. Daniel suddenly slammed a drawer shut. There has to be another compartment. Mom looked furious. Think. Your grandmother never trusted banks. She hid everything herself. Melissa rubbed her forehead. What if there isn't anything here? Mom turned sharply. There is. Otherwise, she wouldn't have left that clue. I froze. That clue. They knew about the map. How? Before I could think it through, Daniel answered my question without realizing it. We never should have let Lawson keep that envelope. Mom shot him a furious look. Lower your voice. My blood ran cold. They knew Mr. Lawson had the envelope all along, which meant they had been watching him too. Suddenly my phone vibrated inside my coat pocket. One short buzz, then another. I had forgotten to silence it. The sound was barely audible, but in the stillness of the winter night, it was enough. Three heads turned toward the open greenhouse door at exactly the same moment. Daniel whispered only two words. "She's here." Daniel's voice cut through the freezing air. "She's here." Everything inside the greenhouse stopped. For one terrifying second, no one moved. Then my mother reacted first. "Go outside, now." Daniel rushed toward the door. I didn't wait. I turned and ran. Not blindly. I already knew this property better than anyone still standing inside that greenhouse. Grandma had taught me every shortcut before I was old enough to ride a bicycle. The narrow stone path curved around the vegetable garden. A broken section of the old wooden fence led toward the apple trees. Behind them stood the tool shed. As children, Daniel and I had played hide and seek there every summer. He always forgot one thing. There were two paths. Everyone used the obvious one. Grandma and I used the second. I slipped behind a row of dormant raspberry bushes, just as Daniel reached the backyard. His flashlight swept across the snow. Left, right, again. He was looking for footprints. He found them immediately, fresh, leading toward the greenhouse. Then they suddenly disappeared. He frowned. "Where?" I smiled despite myself. The stone path beneath the bushes wasn't covered with snow. My tracks ended there. Grandma had designed it that way because she hated slipping during winter. Daniel had forgotten it even existed. He kept running toward the church. Wrong direction. I waited until his flashlight disappeared before quietly circling back toward the greenhouse. The voices inside had become louder. Melissa sounded exhausted. "We have to stop. She's going to call the police." Mom answered sharply. "Not until we find it. Daniel can keep her busy." I slowly stepped closer. The side window had been cracked for years. Grandpa never repaired it. Grandma used to joke that plants liked fresh air. Now it allowed every word inside to escape. Melissa dropped another flower pot. "I still don't understand why you're so sure it's here." Mom sighed impatiently. "Because Eleanor never trusted banks. She trusted hiding places." Daniel finally realized there was a second key. He found the journal. He found the map. The map, so they had opened Mr. Lawson's envelope. No, that wasn't possible. He had just given it to me. Then another thought hit me. There had been two envelopes. One for me, one for him. Grandma had prepared backups, exactly like her, never trusting a single copy of anything important. Melissa spoke again. "Even if we find it, Claire owns the house. She'll still stop the sale." Mom became unusually quiet. Then she said something that explained everything. "The house isn't what matters anymore." I stopped breathing. Daniel walked back into the greenhouse. Didn't find her. Mom barely looked at him. "Forget Claire. Forget the closing. Find the ledger. Ledger, not deed, not cash, not jewelry. A ledger." Daniel looked confused. "Are you sure it still exists?" Mom stared at him. "Your grandfather kept records of everything. Every loan, every investment, every agreement. Your grandmother told me she destroyed them. She lied. I knew she lied. A ledger." Suddenly, dozens of forgotten conversations rushed back into my mind. Grandpa had owned a small construction company. He never trusted computers. Every payment, every contract, every partnership. He wrote everything by hand. After he died, Mom once spent an entire weekend helping Grandma organize old files. I remembered asking whether they had thrown anything away. Mom answered too quickly. Just useless paperwork. Had she been looking for the ledger even then? Daniel suddenly asked the question already forming in my head. "What's even in it?" Mom hesitated. Long enough to make me realize Daniel didn't know the whole story either. Finally, she answered. "Proof. Proof of what?" Another pause. Then she whispered. "Of who actually paid for this house." Everything inside me froze. Paid for the house? Grandma and Grandpa had lived there for 40 years. The mortgage had been finished decades ago. Unless the story I'd believed my entire life wasn't true. Mom continued speaking, almost to herself. "If Claire reads that ledger, she'll find out what your grandfather really did." Daniel frowned. "I thought Grandma inherited the house from him." Mom looked directly at him. "She didn't. She bought it, every dollar, by herself. Your father lost the first house through gambling before you were born. Your grandparents never wanted anyone to know." The greenhouse fell completely silent. Even Daniel looked stunned. Melissa slowly lowered the flashlight. Dad gambled away their first home? Mom nodded once. Your grandmother worked 2 jobs for nearly 12 years. She paid every cent for this property. Your grandfather spent the rest of his life pretending he'd built everything. She let him keep his dignity. Then she looked toward the doorway. When she transferred the house to Claire, she wasn't just rewarding her. She was protecting the only person she believed understood what sacrifice actually looked like. I felt tears fill my eyes. Not because of the money, because for the first time in my life, I understood my grandmother. She hadn't chosen me because I was her favorite. She had chosen me because, in her eyes, I had quietly lived the same kind of life she had. Always giving, rarely asking, caring more than anyone noticed. Then Daniel asked one final question. If the ledger proves all that, why were you so desperate to destroy it? My mother's answer came almost as a whisper. Because I told all of you that your grandfather bought this house. I told that story for 30 years. If the truth comes out, you'll all know I've been lying since before either of you were born. At that exact moment, someone behind me quietly said, I don't think that's the only lie Eleanor wanted to expose. I turned. Mr. Whitaker was standing just a few feet away, and in his hands, he was holding a weathered black ledger wrapped in oilcloth. Mr. Whitaker looked exactly as he had the afternoon Grandma signed her final documents. Calm, measured, never dramatic. He stepped into the greenhouse as if he had all the time in the world. My mother spun around. How did you? He raised a hand. Mrs. Whitmore, for once I'd appreciate finishing a sentence before someone lies to me. No one spoke. Even Daniel looked stunned. The old attorney placed the weathered ledger on the workbench. It wasn't large. Black leather. Worn corners. A brass clasp polished smooth by decades of use. Grandpa had carried it everywhere. I suddenly remembered seeing it on his desk when I was little. I'd assumed it was just another accounting book. Apparently, it wasn't. Mr. Whitaker rested one hand on it. Your mother is right about one thing. This book changes everything. Daniel stared at it. Then why didn't Grandma destroy it? Because she didn't believe in destroying the truth. She believed in waiting until the right person was ready to carry it. Mom took one cautious step forward. Give it to me. Mr. Whitaker didn't move. No, it belongs to Claire. Legally and morally. Mom's composure finally cracked. You don't understand. That book will ruin this family. He looked directly at her. No. The decisions your family made ruined this family. The ledger merely records them. For several long seconds, no one moved. Snow drifted softly through the cracked greenhouse window. The silence felt almost sacred. Then Daniel suddenly reached for the ledger. I'll take it. Before his hand could touch the cover, Mr. Whitaker closed the brass clasp with a quiet click. Daniel, if you touch this without Claire's permission after everything that's happened, you'll make an already difficult situation much worse. Daniel slowly lowered his hand. For the first time since I'd arrived home, I saw genuine shame in his face. Not fear, not anger. Shame. Melissa quietly sat on an overturned flower pot. I don't even know what we're fighting about anymore. Neither did I, until Mr. Whitaker opened the first page. The handwriting was unmistakable. Grandpa's. Every page contained dates, expenses, invoices, contracts. Small notes written in the margins. Nothing looked extraordinary. Until Mr. Whitaker stopped halfway through the book. Here. He turned it toward me. December 14th. 38 years earlier. Purchase of Hawthorne Lane. Below it were 2 columns. Funds contributed by Eleanor Whitmore, 97%. Funds contributed by Thomas Whitmore, 3%. Daniel frowned. That can't be right. Mr. Whitaker quietly nodded. It is. Your grandfather never hid the truth from himself, only from everyone else. Mom slowly closed her eyes. She already knew. I looked at the next page. Grandpa had written something underneath the numbers. Without Eleanor, there would be no house. One day, I hope the children never have to know. I felt tears gathering again. Grandpa hadn't been proud of the lie. He had been ashamed of it. Mr. Whitaker carefully turned another page, then another. The entries continued for years. Mortgage payments, utility bills, medical expenses, Grandma's second job, night shifts, weekend catering work. every sacrifice carefully recorded, every dollar accounted for. Then we reached the final pages. The handwriting changed. Grandma's. She had continued writing after Grandpa died. The last entry wasn't financial at all. It was a letter, not to her children. To me, Claire. If you are reading this, then I guessed correctly. They searched everywhere except the one place they never thought to look. Not because they are foolish, because greedy people always look for treasure. They rarely look for truth. I swallowed hard. The greenhouse had become completely silent. Even my mother couldn't look away. Grandma's words continued. I am not leaving you this house because you worked the hardest, or because you loved me the most. Love cannot be measured. Neither can sacrifice. I am leaving it to you because every time life treated you unfairly, you chose kindness without becoming weak. That is much harder than people realize. I wiped away a tear before continuing. If my children ever ask why I trusted you instead of them, tell them this. I never wanted someone who would keep my house. I wanted someone who would keep this family honest. The last sentence stopped me completely. If they still choose money after learning the truth, let them walk away. If they choose each other instead, open the front door and invite them home. No one spoke, not for a very long time. Finally, Daniel broke the silence. He looked at our mother. Is any of this wrong? She answered without lifting her head. No, Melissa quietly whispered. Then why did you keep lying? Mom's voice trembled. Because after your father died, I couldn't bear admitting that my own mother had carried this family while I told everyone it was him. It was easier to protect his memory than face my own shame. Daniel slowly sat down. All this, the forged signature, the sale, the lies, it started because of one lie told 30 years ago. Mom nodded, then whispered something I never expected to hear. I stopped knowing how to tell the truth. Mr. Whitaker gently closed the ledger. Claire, the closing begins in less than 2 hours. Legally, you can stop it with a single signature. Or rather, by refusing to sign. I looked around the greenhouse. At my brother, at my sister, at my mother. Then at the old ledger that had survived decades, simply because my grandmother believed truth eventually catches up with everyone. For the first time since receiving that email, I knew exactly what I was going to do. But none of them would see it coming. Mr. Whitaker looked at me. The decision is yours, Claire, no one else's. For years, I had imagined what I would do if my family ever betrayed me. In every version, I yelled. I cried. I walked away. Instead, I surprised even myself. I picked up the ledger, closed it, then looked at my mother. We're going to the closing, all of us. Daniel blinked. What? You heard me. The buyers deserve the truth. The title company deserves the truth. And Grandma deserved better than having her final Christmas become a crime scene. No one argued. Not because they agreed. Because they knew they had lost. At 9:35 that morning, we walked into the title company's conference room. The atmosphere changed the moment we entered. The buyers were already seated. A middle-aged couple named Richard and Susan Keller. They smiled politely, until they noticed my mother, then Daniel, then me, finally Mr. Whitaker. The realtor stood up immediately. Claire, I'm so glad you're here. The title officer looked confused. Mrs. Whitmore, we were told you wouldn't be attending. I smiled politely. That seems to have been a popular assumption. No one laughed. Mr. Whitaker placed 2 folders on the conference table. One contained the original deed. The other contained the forged power of attorney. The title officer looked from one to the other. I'm afraid I don't understand, Mr. Whitaker answered calmly. You will in a moment. The room became completely silent. He opened the first folder. The legal owner of Hawthorne Lane is Claire Whitmore. She has never signed a power of attorney. She has never authorized today's transaction. She has never agreed to sell this property. He slid the forged document across the table. This signature is fraudulent. The title officer's face immediately changed. He picked up the document, compared it with Claire's driver's license, then looked directly at me. Mrs. Whitmore, did you sign this? No, not even close. He slowly removed his glasses, then pressed a button beneath the conference table. Within seconds, another employee entered the room. Please suspend today's closing immediately. No documents leave this room. The buyers exchanged confused glances. Richard finally spoke. "Excuse me, are you saying this sale isn't legal?" Mr. Whitaker answered before anyone else could. "Correct. It cannot proceed." Richard slowly leaned back, then looked toward my mother. "Yesterday you assured us your daughter had already approved everything." My mother couldn't answer. Susan quietly reached across the table and squeezed her husband's hand. "We'll find another house." She said it gently, almost apologetically. I felt awful for them. They had done nothing wrong. I looked at them. "I'm truly sorry. You were dragged into something you never should have been part of." Richard nodded. "That's not your fault." The title officer stood. "Mrs. Whitmore, Mr. Whitmore, Ms. Carter. I strongly suggest you obtain legal counsel before speaking further. The attempted transaction will be reported according to state requirements." Nobody argued. There was nothing left to argue. Outside the building, snow was falling again. Daniel stopped beside me. "I'm not asking you to forgive me. I don't deserve that." I nodded. "You're right." He lowered his eyes. I kept telling myself Mom knew what she was doing. It was easier than asking questions. That sentence hurt more than anything else. Because it was true. He hadn't acted out of hatred. He had acted out of convenience. Melissa quietly approached next. She handed me Grandma's gardening journal. "I found this in the greenhouse. I should have given it to you weeks ago. I'm sorry. I accepted it." "Thank you." She started crying. Not dramatically, just quietly, like someone finally exhausted from pretending. Then only Mom remained. She looked at the old brick courthouse across the street before speaking. "Your grandmother spent her whole life protecting this family. I spent years protecting my pride. I don't know when those became the same thing in my mind." I answered honestly. "They never were." She nodded slowly. "I know that now." For the first time in my life, she didn't ask me to make things easier. She simply accepted the consequences. Mr. Whitaker walked over. "Claire, everything from here is straightforward. The fraudulent documents will be investigated. The sale is void. The house remains yours." He smiled, then added quietly, "Your grandmother chose well." 6 months later, Hawthorne Lane looked different. The porch had been repaired. The greenhouse stood straight again. Instead of hiding secrets, it held tomatoes, herbs, and the roses Grandma loved. The investigation ended without the dramatic courtroom battle people imagine from television. The forged documents led to financial penalties, restitution, and professional consequences for everyone involved in preparing or submitting them. Daniel accepted responsibility and cooperated from the beginning. Melissa did the same. My mother admitted her role instead of forcing everyone through years of litigation. Justice arrived quietly, exactly the way Grandma would have wanted. Daniel eventually found steady work with a local contractor. For the first time in years, he earned something instead of expecting it. Melissa began volunteering every Saturday at the senior center where Grandma used to donate homemade blankets. Mom sold her own house and moved into a small townhouse across town. Not because she had to, because she said she needed a place that didn't remind her of the lies she'd spent decades protecting. We didn't become the perfect family. That never happens. But we became an honest one, and that's much harder. Every Christmas Eve, I unlock the front door before sunrise. The smell of cinnamon fills the kitchen. The old angel ornament hangs on the tree. Its repaired wing catches the lights just enough to remind me that broken things don't always need replacing. Sometimes they need honesty, sometimes patience, sometimes both. People still ask whether I'll ever sell Hawthorne Lane. I always give the same answer. Maybe one day, when it becomes the right decision. Not when someone else decides its price. Because my grandmother's greatest gift was never the house. It was teaching me that peace built on lies is only silence. Real peace begins the moment you stop being afraid of the truth. Thank you for staying with me until the end of my story. If it touched your heart, please subscribe because I share a brand new family story here every single day. And if you're not ready to leave yet, open the next story on your screen. I have a feeling it will stay with you just as long.